So the time has come again when I have to convey something. I'm currently writing, been writing for several hours already today, but reading through the odd comment from time to time. I see people vocalising opinion and, you know, stating theirs and this and the other. What I will say is about anything I say in these videos, don't cling on to it too much. Most of you that are long-term viewers with me know that I don't get married to anything I say. You know, and if I do, I'll be divorced the very next day. I'm not owned by anything, and I don't own anything. And each day, as I feel and experience and learn something new, then of course my opinions will be reformatted. And so the last video I was speaking about the kingdom of God, and that was only half of the beginning of what needs to be said on that subject matter. I'm going to be speaking at great length with all of these things, and for those of you that are just watching the videos and can't be bothered to read the chapters, then you'll never grasp where really I'm coming from. And yeah, and you'll probably jump on a variety of bandwagon when something's said. This stuff is really condensed, and if I say something, or if I appear to be saying or inferring something, then it's like, you know, when people get misquoted, when the pundits just take one verse out of a whole conversation and then try and make something of it. It can't be done. You know, making something of this life is exceedingly difficult in any case, and needs labouring forever with endless books. And so, you know, I'm just commencing on my book and conveying what I've accumulated in all these years. But like I say, when people put comments down, I think this and I don't believe that and this and the other, what I'm looking for is your personal experience with things like this. Because thinking and quoting something that you've heard somewhere doesn't cut it with me. I'm not interested in that. And, you know, all it's going to do is probably give rise to myself or other people dismissing what you've said. So don't say things without really thinking about them. And what you see, at the very least, what any of you will do when you listen to me is that you will know that I'm speaking from a personal experience. Whether you consider that is ultimately right or wrong, what is right or wrong is my experience. And if I say to you that I had Jesus speak to me, I had God chastise me, I've been to hell and I've had angels and this, that and the other, then, you know, I think just accepting what I'm saying might be a good idea if you're going to stand the test of time with these videos. Because if you discount any of those things, there's no point in you being here. You've got to be some sort of a believer to be here and to continue with all this stuff. Otherwise it just isn't going to work for you. And what I'm saying is, from the very offset, I've never had a belief system in anything. I don't like the concept of belief. I really struggle with it. I liked to know, but then when we try to know, we discover that it's very difficult to actually know. And so it's kind of like you're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. You know, believing and knowing. Who actually knows anything? You know, we can know for sure a very limited amount of information. And if we're going to know something, it absolutely has to be our personal experience, because it's the only thing remotely we can depend upon. We can never depend on anything anybody is going to be writing or saying. Scientists or politicians or, the geniuses of the world. I mean, Einstein had his flaws, and there's many of them. As soon as he stepped outside of his math realm, not much of what he said really had any veracity to it. I mean, Einstein, for instance, was a pacifist, and it's all great, it's all well and good being a pacifist, but at the time of the onset of the Second World War, with the Third Reich coming into power, well, his whole perception on that was, I don't mind him, it'll all blow over, just ignore him. And then people were saying, I don't think ignoring this guy is going to work, Mr. Einstein. And so, we all have our moments, that's what I'm saying. And so whatever I'm saying, don't get too involved with it. It's just an idea, it's just ideas, and my experience will never ever come close to any of yours. And for those of you that have listened and read about near-death experiences and the paranormal, well, that's a good realm to be in, because then it's kind of like anything goes. We accept that this is a very, very peculiar thing, this life, and as soon as we start to get married to our biases and beliefs and all this sort of thing, that's when we go and spoil it all. So when I'm speaking about Jesus, I mean, I'm not convinced about anything about Jesus. All I'm doing is I'm referring to a dialogue and a rhetoric, a way of life, a suggestion for an ideology. That's all Jesus was as far as I'm concerned. Son of God, where do we go with all this stuff? But what I will say is that somebody that I knew to be Jesus spoke to me telepathically whilst I was lying on that couch looking at an image which looked like him in a tapestry over there. And all the rest of them, which if you've read the book, then you'll be familiar with. If you haven't read the book and you've not really had too much familiarity with the Awaken Brave channel, then all what I'm going to be saying is just going to be gobbledygook. And so, that being said, the kingdom of God is stated is within us all. What does that mean? The kingdom of God is within us all. Well, it must be in our minds. It must be within our consciousness. It must be pertaining to our spirit. All of a sudden, we've gone into murky water again, haven't we? What does it mean? We'll never know what this stuff means. What it means to me, what it's meant to me, is that listening and reading and absorbing and intellectualizing and intuiting those words, I've derived something from my experience. And my experience has been that I've been to certain realms of the mind, of spirit, and I've experienced certain things which resemble what is being spoken about by Jesus and apparently by God and by gurus and prophets and all the rest of it. And so, truly I say unto you, the kingdom of God is within you all. Well, I've pondered that. I've scratched my head about it for many years, people, and I've read hundreds and hundreds of books pertaining to it, and I've had a lot of experience. And what I'm doing in this book, I'm conveying what I consider ultimately this stuff has meant to me. Now, it doesn't mean to say that it's going to mean the same to the next man. But when Jesus says that the kingdom of God is within you all, and basically heaven is a frame of mind, because when the prophets and apostles said to Jesus, can you tell us where this heaven is, he says it's all around you, and yet you don't see. Truly I say unto you that it is within you, and yet you do not feel. And so where I'm coming from is this. There's been times in my life when I have experienced entheogens, and my ego has been obliterated. My consciousness has continued without the aid and the help and encumbrance of the ego. And I have just been pure consciousness. And within that pure consciousness, I felt something which I've never felt, deriving out of the ego or the normal facility and faculty of my human body and mind. And so I would suggest that that's supernatural. And so, well, what else pertains to the supernatural? Heaven, the concept of heaven does. The concept of the Son of God and God, they pertain to the supernatural. So when I have an experience which is outside of the realm of anything I've ever experienced with the body and the ego, then I'm speculating that that's supernatural. It's not natural, it's over and above the naturalness of everyday experience. And so, phenomenological. It's something that we just don't know why these things happen. And so I've experienced many of these things. And when I've experienced these things, I've felt absolutely ecstatic. Beautiful beyond measure. Just on this Jesus experience, just tears of joy flowing for like 20 minutes. Ripples and vibrations and buzzing going on in the body. All this stuff as Jesus showed me what unconditional love was. And so that experience came about after an hour's meditation. And I never tried to project that onto being the message of Jesus. It was just what was in my head. It's what intuitively I knew. Like intuitively I knew Jehovah was ripping me a new asshole. And all the other things that we intuitively know, which feels so powerful. And so, that to me is the kingdom of God. When we feel absolutely blissful, and if Jesus says heaven is all around you, the kingdom of God and heaven have to be the same thing. Because when you go into the kingdom of God and be with the Father, then well, that's where heaven is, isn't it? So it's just different concepts, meaning the same thing. And so I've been to these places, and when someone says in the comments, nobody's been to heaven, well, you can't say things like that. You simply can't say things like that. And when people have died and they've been somewhere, when their body's been clinically dead, and they say that they've felt something, they experienced something, who are you or we or anybody to discount that? We're not. So please don't do it. Not on this channel. Just be open-minded and allow yourself to be free and accepting what other people say. It doesn't cost you nothing. It costs you absolutely nothing. And if your ego is affronted, then your ego has still got mastery of you. And also, this channel is probably not for you. You know, and so I'm not speaking to anyone particularly. I'm just grouping things together that feel what I'm getting now from certain comments and stuff. Heaven and hell pertain to the human being. The concept of them, people are under the delusion that they are unaccessible by us until we die. How can that be so when human beings actually coined those terminologies and presented those concepts to us? Somebody must have experienced them before. So they must exist as far as the human being and his sensibility exists. So when we're speaking about heaven and hell and all this sort of thing, they're everyday things for the human being in certain circumstances. I'm sure lots of you have been to hell. I know I have. I know I went to hell for 18 hours, 666. And when people are speaking about heaven is a balance between everything, no, I'm sorry. Sorry. No. That was hell, and that was absolutely completely on the other side of the heaven that I've experienced. There was no balancing with those two sensations and experiences. And so when, having read all of this literature, an enormous amount on it, I think I'm pretty qualified to pass an opinion on this stuff, particularly having had certain experiences which, for all intents and purposes, comply with what is spoken about. And so, we can go to hell whilst we are living. We can go to heaven because they're human concepts created by humans, and they've been felt by humans, and then they've been projected onto the world, and some religions have taught them one way, other religions have taught them another way. But if you immerse yourselves in Eastern philosophy, then you get a whole different perspective of heaven and hell, by the way. And I've done both, and so, but I'm coming from the Jesus sort of Christian perspective, because that's where, for some unfathomable reason, I've had the most experiences with, like I say, being compromised by hell and experiencing angels, God and Jesus. And so if I had experienced one of the Eastern deities, then I'd be reciting those. But it's not my culture, you see. And so this is the whole thing about all this stuff. We you know, if heaven per se cannot exist, because if it did, then it would be the same for everybody, wouldn't it? If it was an actual place, then it would be the same for everybody. And so, for instance, the Jewish nation created the Jewish Bible, and all of what the Bible pertains to, relates to, stems from their culture. And so, you know, because we in the Western world, we've been infiltrated by that culture and belief system, then it's in our very genetic makeup. It's in our collective unconscious. And so that's why, if we're going to have a spiritual experience, then it's going to be of one of those which we're familiar with. We're not going to be having one, you know, with some like elephant-headed god with like, you know, 20 arms or something. You know, it's exceedingly unlikely, because we're not going to be getting the message. And something about this whole thing is that something, somewhere, wants to give us the message, whether it's our deep-rooted collective unconscious that we share with every human being that's ever lived on the world. That could very well be it. We don't need gods and all the rest of it if that's the case. But we invent gods and we create gods because we pass stories on and illustrations, and they're easy, and they're much more easily digestible and comprehensible, aren't they? And so don't get married to the deities. Let's just try to be philosophical. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm about. Fundamentally, I'm of a philosophical nature. I'm not of a religious nature or spiritual per se. Spiritual things have happened to me. I've experienced many spiritual things, and so now I'm philosophizing about those. And so that's where I'm at. And so what I've experienced certain times in my life, for instance, in this last year, with 5 hours meditation every single day, not having to do anything that's going to stress me out. My life here, I don't have to do anything except go shopping. And so I don't have anything that's going to be stressing me out. I don't have any partners or friends that I see all the time in everyday circumstances. I spend the vast majority of my time alone. And when you do that, it frees up your mind. And when you free up your mind, that's when you enter into the best possible situation a human being can enter. Peace. And peace is also interpreted as love. And it's also interpreted as heaven. And so when we have the greatest of peace and we don't have any anxiety or frustrations or fears or anything like that, as far as the human being is concerned, we are in heaven. That is heaven. Truly I say unto you, the kingdom of God is within you all. It's just that you can't find it. You don't know where to look. And then Eastern gurus, like the one I was just reading, the Yoga of Jesus, the whole book was about meditation. And when you meditate, you become still, you become peaceful, you enter into Christ's consciousness, which is the kingdom of God. And I've been there. Lord knows, I've been there hundreds of times by now, having meditated for these past 13 years. So I know how to get into these places. I know that when you do get into these places, your mind becomes more and more pure, and the world in the abstract looks different. You perceive it different. Why? Because you are not clouding your vision with the constant bullshit that you've got in your mind, which is being projected onto it. And one of the greatest things which is our failing as human beings is that as soon as we become familiar with something, then our mind stores it up, and every time we see a thing like that, similar to it or the exact same thing, what we do, we project back onto it that which we have stored before. So for instance, when we grow up as kids, we learn that these big branchy things, they're called trees, and then we learn words and concepts of leaves and branches and trunks and all this different sort of thing. And because there's so much to learn when we're growing up, then the human mind cannot focus on the minutiae. It just has to grab things from the macro, and it stores all this stuff from the macro. But unfortunately, what happens with the vast majority of people, they never revisit the micro. And so when we grow up and people say about a tree, people just go, oh yeah, I know what a tree is. Do you really? Do you really know what a tree is? There are thousands and thousands of trees on this gorgeous planet, and many of them look extremely different from another. And you just say, oh, I know what a tree is. I beg to differ. I would say there isn't a single one of you out there that knows what a tree is. Because if I sat you down in front of me and I said, can you describe a tree? Tell me something about a tree. Well, it's tall, it's big, it's got branches and leaves. Sometimes the leaves fall off in the winter. Is that it? Oh my God, shocking, shocking. I've got piles of books in there on trees and on the wisdom and nature of trees. And so I know a little bit about trees now because I've looked at them, I've taken an interest in them. So what I'm saying is, when we do that, we enter into a different world because we see a different world. People that don't know anything about trees, how can they see the same as what I see? With my particular knowledge about trees, with my interest and love for trees and my passion, how could they possibly say that they know about trees like I do or see the same thing? It's ridiculous. We don't see the same world, people. And when you become still, and when you don't need to stress every day, then your senses open up into another realm, It's no longer in fight or flight mode. It's no longer in gathering information from a fear-based resource gathering. We look at things out of our inquiring mind because we're inquisitive, because we find things beautiful, because we want to be acquainted, we want to know what's going on around us. And then we start looking down, and we look down smaller and smaller and smaller, and we get into the micro world. And then on other occasions we go out bigger and bigger, bigger into the macro world. And so we see the world in a whole different way. And then you see nuances of colours, and you feel more about everything. Becomes a feeling. You feel something when you hug a tree, when you hold a leaf, when you smell or taste a twig, or all the rest of it. And so we've got a sensory explosion. And when you have a sensory explosion and everything is wonderful, then this world seems very much like the Garden of Eden in its original state, or heaven. And so when you have felt absolutely more joy than you can possibly even sustain in your body, when you couldn't even stand up for the joy that's going on in your body, then as far as the Bible is concerned, when it says that the kingdom of God's been within us all, I've been there. I've actually been to the kingdom of God. I know what they're talking about. And I've been to hell, and I've been to a lot of shit in between. And so, what I'm doing here in this video is, people, you know, isn't going to be easy for anybody. Because all of a sudden now, you know, the channel's been up a couple of weeks, and, you know, I'm making videos like this. Kind of like giving you, the viewer, a little bit of a guided talking to. You know, as to being open-minded. Just don't get too involved with things about what we think we know. You said this and whatever. You know, just chill. I want to listen to your experiences. Whatever phenomenological, spiritual experiences that you've had. Some of you are doing this. You know, what does Jesus mean to you? What does religion mean to you? Get involved with that level. Instead of maybe pointing out other people's errors as far as you consider, or being dismissive or something, bring something to the party. You know? Lay something before us. Hey, Aaron, wow. I've never told this to anyone before, but, you know, I had this experience about when, you know, I met God and all this, that and the other. Great, I'm all ears. But, you know, if there's a contradiction going on, and, you know, you're trying to pick at what I am conveying, you're not going to change me by that, by vocalising your opinion on it. I've formed my opinion, and I've done it through a massive amount of knowledge and experience. And I'm projecting now the world as I have found it. Now, if you want to project the world as you found it, great. But I don't want anybody to be trying to chip away at the world that I've already formed. It's not going to happen. It's just going to cause a divide. And so, anyway, this video was basically to deliver some information which may be useful to you, because the kingdom of God actually is here. The kingdom of hell actually is here. I mean, how could anybody say or dismiss anybody going to hell when it clearly states in the Bible that God cast down Satan, who was his right-hand angel at the time, cast down to earth to have dominion over the whole earth. Well, that makes the whole earth hell then, doesn't it? If he has dominion over this place, then it's just the same as him having dominion in Gehenna or you know, hell. His dominion is his dominion. And so we all know what hell's like because apparently we're living in it. And when we get outside of the left hemisphere of our brain and we enter into the right, which is pure bliss and creation, that's heaven. And I explained this to one of you viewers in many different ways. You know, and so be pensive. Think a little bit more before you project. And ask yourself, do I really think I know that? Is that really my experience? Is it just a belief? Is it something that I've just heard? I think, I'll recite that again. I'll pass that on. You know, because that's what 99% of people do on YouTube. They're just passing on other people's information. But my channel is unique in that I'm conveying my absolute experience in the greatest and finest of detail with a conviction that you rarely see. And so just enjoy that, people. And when I convey something, ask yourself, can you experience that? Not, oh, that doesn't exist or it's not possible to do this. Ask yourself, could you experience the same thing? And then you look at how I've experienced it, and then you would come up with the rational conclusion that you could. So isn't that a better take home? You know, could I experience the kingdom of God like Aaron has? Could I experience Jesus speaking to me like Aaron has? How did he do it? Instead of, oh, it's not possible, oh, that's stupid, I don't believe in that. We're not going forward with that, are we? You know, these experiences are phenomenological. They all pertain to the human being. Every single thing that's been written about pertains to the human being. There's nothing outside of the realm of the human being. And if anybody says to you heaven is up there somewhere, ask them where. Can you show me? Can you tell me? You know, it all falls to pieces. And then when you read more and more and more and more, you start to go, oh, well, it's all metaphor, really. It's just all suggestions, it's storytelling, it's parables and all this sort of thing. There's nothing outside of human consciousness. It's all us. The whole cosmos is within us. Consciousness. It's simple. When you look at something, where's the information? It's not there. The information isn't there. The information's here. And when you see the sun, is the sun 93 million miles away? No. The sun is in here. Because the information from the body is being configured in here. It's all going on in here. Only I would even go one step further and say that this brain and everything is just a fiction. There's nothing even going on in here. We're just being dreamt. And so just imagine yourself as being God, dreaming that you are Aaron, for instance. I'm God. The whole cosmos is my creation, and I'm dreaming about some dude called Aaron. If you start thinking like that, you'll be closer to the reality.